Three, two, one, and yeah, we're live. Right. Hi guys, back for another Titan Talk. This is Caroline. I met Caroline 3 years ago. You first came in and asked for Olympic weightlifting, wasn't it? You'd been to CrossFit classes and kind of tinkered around, and then thought, well, yeah, Olympic weightlifting is what I want to do. And yeah, that was it. 3 years ago, and she's been client ever since. And
6 o'clock in the morning.
6 o'clock, that's right. Monday morning, 6 o'clock, 6 a.m. Yeah, in them days I only worked between 6 and 12, wasn't it? 6 a.m. to 12 noon.
Yeah.
Because I was lecturing as well at the time, so I had to lecture and long days.
Yeah.
So introduce yourself, Caroline. Tell
a
bit more about yourself.
So I'm Caroline. I am 42, I think. 2 kids, and I'm a GP. And I got to know T when he was running these sort of fitness classes in the morning, weren't you, for teams of people, and Kelly had gone, and I'd gone to CrossFit, and because I wanted to do some lifting, and I wanted to do the hardest possible thing, and that looked to be Olympic lifting to me. And then somebody mentioned in one of these groups that's what you were trained coaching, so I got in touch with you, and that's how I know you, and I've sort of been with you ever since as my Olympic lifting coach through numerous injuries and brain meltdowns, and you've just been a consistent part of my life, haven't you, for the past 3 years? It's been good. Seeing you into your new gym, and now this. So yeah, it's been good.
I know you've seen me through 3 gyms actually, haven't you? The first little one, and then the bigger one.
Yeah. Then they move around the corner, and then this one. Yeah.
Where is he?
Now this.
Maybe 4.
Maybe 4. I hope so. Yeah,
we'll see.
That'll be good. Yeah.
But talk more, like give everyone an idea of your academic background. So we know you're a GP, but
so I went to Liverpool University to study medicine there, and then when I finished, when I qualified as a doctor, I worked for 4 or 5 years in Liverpool doing general medicine, and then more specifically nephrology, which is kidneys. And then I decided, or sort of fell into general practice, and became a GP down on Merseyside for a couple of years, and then moved up here. So I've been a GP for over 10 years now, and I qualified as a doctor in 2002, so coming up for 20 years. Yeah, bloody hell.
Feel old yet?
Yeah, and you say it out loud. I remember thinking when I qualified, you could claim your pension after your NHS pension is 40 years, and you could claim your pension at 40 years. And I remember thinking, God, that's a lifetime. But here we are, half the way through. So yeah, so that's where I am. I'm not an academic person, though. I'm not. I'm a much more hands-on, practical person.
How as a more practical person, how did you find the academia with becoming a doctor? Was that difficult? What was it like?
I was quite lazy. I learned all of my medicine. I don't know how I got through the exams. I don't really remember doing a massive amount for them, but learned all my medicine on the job. So I think I know a lot of stuff now, but that's through doing it, really. That's how I learn.
I think that's the case with a lot of things. I did a master's in S&C, but by the time I'd done a master's, I had that much experience under my belt that I didn't learn.
Yeah.
I learned some fantastic things about the coaching process, but on a scientific, physiological basis, I didn't learn much new stuff at all.
And medicine's not an academic subject. It's practical, pattern recognition, risk calculation, past experience kind of thing. So it's a common sense requirement, but it's not really academic unless you go off into research and stuff. So it is much more about, recognizing patterns and communication skills and analysis and assessment of risk.
And is that something that's probably especially true for GP?
Oh yeah, absolutely, because you have very little in the way of hard data to go on. It's you're very much you make thousands of decisions in a day based on what people tell you and what you ask them, and you don't have hard tests or investigations at your fingertips to fall back on. So all that pattern recognition is everything in general practice, and you will filter information about someone the minute they walk through the door about how ill they are and what you need to do and whether you should be worried. And whilst you're sitting there talking to your GP, that's what your GP is doing all the time.
It's interesting that, like, I mean, it's definitely, from what you said, it's an intuitive process, and obviously you've got the learning and the background necessary to make that intuitive process the best it can possibly be, I guess.
Yeah.
But I mean, how hard is it to? Because I mean, one of the things that I talk about a lot is perception. Your own perception will influence how you interpret information. So how hard is it to become? It's impossible, I'd say, to become completely objective. But how hard is it to make your perspective objective enough in that scenario?
It is incredibly difficult, and what you'll find in general practice is that you won't see anything for ages, and then a rare condition will come along 3 times in a week. Now that's probably not because the rare condition has just turned up at that time. It's because you've seen it once and you're looking for it more closely, and so you'll find things that fit. So there's a lot of bias in terms of what you've seen and what you've done, and what we find is if clinicians make a mistake, they'll generally be much more cautious for the next few months afterwards, and then you'll ease back into it again as your risk management and risk decision making refers back to the place it was originally. So and your own life experience tints and changes the way that you consult and interact and what you're looking out for in people, and you've got to be aware that that's something that you do, and sometimes it's really useful and sometimes it's not, and it's always handy if you're bashing away at something and not getting somewhere to get somebody else's opinion, just to make sure that confirmation bias isn't there and that you're not always reflecting things back to your own level of comfort, really.
I mean, geez, it must be incredibly difficult, because you can't always, and we spoke briefly before on it in some of the sessions, where you've got 10 minutes with someone in a consultation.
Yeah.
And I mean, is there even any time, especially with the pressure the NHS is under now, to get someone to second guess your opinion on things that you might?
I mean, I suppose that's the nice thing about general practice, is that you see the same people and you can bring people back and you build a relationship. And so some of, my patients, I've known them for 10 years now, and I know the family network. So, but at the beginning, it's really tough. I mean, and it takes 10 years to get to know a person and how they interact with other people and how that's going to influence their health and how they perceive their health. And I'm still learning, and I'm still learning about family connections even now, sort of 10 years in. So you can't do it in 10 minutes, but you can do it in 10 years. And that's what general practice has that other specialities don't have, is that knowledge and that ability to really know someone and bring them back. So if you're doubting something or you don't know, you can order a test, see if it confirms what you're thinking, and then bring them back and then do something else. But it's a skill knowing what to order and when, and what to investigate and when not to investigate. That's even more important.
I mean, obviously we can't go into any details, but can you think of a random example of like an interaction that maybe did go well or didn't go well?
There's millions of them, but they're more over time. You have patients sometimes that are very, very anxious about their own health. And I think when you don't know them well, the tendency is that we're anxious about not making a mistake. So we over investigate them. And every time we order an investigation, they think there's something wrong with them because we think there's something wrong with them. And that multiplies their health anxiety. So we do more tests and that makes them more anxious. So once you really know patients, what you can do is you can say, look, we've ruled out all the dangerous stuff. I don't know why you feel that this is going on or what's going on. I can't give you answers as to what's going on, but I know that there isn't anything serious. So why don't we look at why you're anxious, or what role anxiety plays upon the way that symptoms manifest themselves in your life? And you can do that, and that takes years.
Yeah.
But it can that can be the most life-changing thing for a patient, is to actually get them to understand that they will have some ill health at some points, but that there aren't always medical answers for what they're experiencing.
And that's an interesting one. How often are you even allowed as a GP to turn around and say, look, you need to sleep better, eat better, and maybe do some exercise, which we'll come on to later on?
Say that all the time, because that's true of everyone, isn't it? Everyone needs to sleep better, eat better, and exercise. Everybody. But we say that all the time. Once you've excluded dangerous stuff, then that's what we come back to, and you can make massive inroads into patients' psyche and physical and mental health that way. We try and look at patients in the whole, and I think that's what can be different from other specialities, who are, especially with the way the NHS is now, very, very focused in on their specific niche area, whereas what we try to look at is the person and how everything else influences and affects them.
You're kind of like a systems analyst in a way. You're
we're like the we're the overacting all-seeing eye that specialists won't necessarily get, because they're focusing on their bits. So
that makes sense. And do you think that there's a limit within the NHS, because maybe some specialists, you come through a specialist and they're so pigeonholed that they may not see something else? Do you think that there's an issue with that, or do you think that was the right way to go, and do you think the system works okay?
I think it's the right thing to get to, as long as you've got GPs and you've got someone who can take that overseeing role. I think if you lost that, things would be very, very disjointed for patients and quite bewildering, really. I think we're the anchor, especially patients that have lots of things going on. So if you've got heart disease and you've got diabetes and you've got a bit of renal failure, you'll be seeing 3 different specialists at the hospital who'll all be focusing in on their bit. They'll all be starting different medicines that has a knock-on effect on those other systems, and then we're there to just check overall that everything is balanced. And that's, if you're a good GP, that's what you're doing well.
Sounds like a lot of stress. Sounds like a lot of, if you mess up, it can be quite severe.
Yeah, I mean, you hold a lot of things in your head. Like, I'm the personal GP for over 2,000 patients. So, and a lot of those you won't see, and a lot of those don't have lots of complex things. But the ones that do take up quite a lot of time. I think there's a saying, isn't there, that you do 80% of your clinical face-to-face with 20% of your patients. And that's true. That's true. So it doesn't feel like stress. That's not the stressful bit. The stressful bit's managing your staff and and going to meetings and stuff like that. That's not the stressful bit.
That must be interesting though, because if you've got someone who's agitated and maybe they're worried about their health and they've got that anxiety built up already, and they're coming into your staff and maybe they're acting in a way that is interpreted poorly by your staff, and say your staff's having a bad day, and they're just people too with all their stuff going on in their life, and then they're fucking blowing up. I mean, I'm guessing that's the bit that's the hard bit.
Well, it happens all the time, and I think especially now, our staff have found the whole thing around coronavirus very, very stressful, because all of a sudden they're putting their families' lives at risk by coming to work, and that freaks them out. That's not what they ever signed up for. And on the other side, the way that we provide our services has changed massively, and patients have just had to come to terms with that overnight, whereas they've been used to doing things in a certain way for their whole lifetimes, and all of a sudden they can't come to the surgery, everything's done over the phone, we're asking for video consultations. So that causes a level of anxiety for them, and that is transferred then onto our staff, and as you say, our staff feel anxious and they transfer that back. So I mean, a big part of the role has been supporting the brilliant work that our staff have done, being really thankful to the flexibility of the patients and the way they've managed the change, managing ourselves through it as well, because, you know, we've had to implement a lot of change, and it's been fully, Helen Stammer said that you can watch staff fall like dominoes. So everyone's had their wobbles, luckily at different times, so that, you know, you will have got through your wobble and you're there to help your members of staff as they go through theirs. And I think that's what's happened for us, is that the clinical staff had their bit, and then the reception staff, and now we know what we're doing and we're back on, which is just as well, because the patients are starting to come back in with the routine stuff now, because they sort of stayed away for a good 4 weeks, but they're starting to come back in now as well. So it's going to be interesting times, I think.
And how do people, I mean, I personally know people that don't like to pick up the phone, who certainly wouldn't like a phone consultation.
Yeah.
I mean, how do you handle that? How do you deal with that? That must be virtually impossible to.
I've been wanting to change to phone consultations for a long time, and felt a lot of pushback, both from people at work but also from patients, but they haven't had a choice now. So change has just been forced upon them. And I think actually the patients have been amazing. We've had no one struggle with it. They've all been open to it. They've all been really understanding as to why it has to happen. And we've not had any sort of pushback against it at all. And it's amazing how much you can do on the phone without doing the face-to-face stuff. We do need to do some of it, but it is pretty amazing what we've been able to do.
And do you think that should be a permanent fixture, that you should keep the phone consultations for the main body and then have some come through?
Not completely, but I think it's going to be a feature that is going to stay and should stay. Yeah, for everybody really.
Yeah, I actually think, I mean, looking at the way things are going with this coronavirus, it seems to be that people are working from home no problem and being just as productive from home, which.
And I think.
Go ahead, sorry.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say the coronavirus is going to be with us for a long time. So the NHS is gearing up for it being around for 18 months of sort of impeded working practice. And I think the long-term effects will be longer than that as well. So I can't imagine normal social interaction for another 18 months or so. I think we're going to have to get used to it.
I think Ireland seems to, in the south, I know, obviously being from Ireland, I'm going to know a lot about it, and I think they're looking at opening up again in 3 weeks, partially. I think you can get together in small groups and so on. Do you think that's going to happen here? I mean, the death toll is much higher.
I think they're going to go for small groups within family moves. So you'll have nominated people who you're allowed to see, and that's it. And I can't imagine they'll be bigger than groups of 10, and I think that'll be it. And then I think that like if, for example, when you're in hospital, they're going to need to be wearing protective gear every time, so that's going to increase the length of time it takes to go and see someone. So I think the hospital efficiency is probably going to be reduced by 1/3 to 50%. When you're doing operations in theatre, they're going to have to put on all the protective gear, take it off again. That's making theatre time really inefficient. So again, that's going to be operating at sort of 30 to 50%. So there will be a loosening, but it will be nothing like normal. Schools aren't just going to open and everyone's going to go back. There'll be a class that goes in, maybe they'll have to separate them out. You might have, you know, a class that does 2 weeks in, 2 weeks off, so that they can get the other class in. It's not, things just aren't going to open up, because if they do, this virus is going to spread again, that our number's going to go back up, and we're going to be in the exact same position we were in before. because when you think about what's happened overnight, basically the NHS stopped doing routine work. Okay, so yes, the NHS has coped amazingly, but that's because it stopped doing everything it was doing before, put tools down and just did coronavirus and just got ready for it. And so in that respect, the immediate danger is over and it coped amazingly well. But you can't not do all the other stuff forever. So we're looking at reintroducing some of the other stuff, but that is going to be less efficient. It's going to be done under the fact that everyone's going to be needing to wear PPE and everything. Plus, the virus is going to, as you loosen up social interaction, the virus is going to spread again. And we're going to come into flu season too. So it's going to be, interesting.
I mean, what you said there is they've stopped a lot of our routine procedures. Would that include things like heart bypasses and so on and so forth? Like
elective surgery. Yeah. So new diagnosis of cancer they're still doing, but they have halted cancer treatment. So they've suspended chemotherapy, they've suspended certain operations. If you have an acute heart attack and the only way they're going to keep you alive is to do a heart bypass, you get a heart bypass. But if you were planning on having a heart bypass done, that's been put off for 3 months. So all that stuff was just stopped overnight, really. And it's still there, it still needs to be done.
Do you think that that had an influence? Because there's a lot of people now, by no means don't think this is a loaded question. I have my own opinions, which I'm happy to share on this. But do you think that that might have affected the death toll then? That some of the people, will have died from a heart attack that they may have had anyway and may actually have been able to prevent those? Given that the coronavirus didn't take place?
We know that A&E attendances dropped overnight. They basically disappeared overnight. Yeah. Now, people were still having heart attacks, but they didn't come. People were still having strokes, but they didn't come. We know that the new referrals, the new cancer referrals that we do have dropped off overnight. And again, there are still people with symptoms of cancer there, but they're not coming to see us, and therefore we're not referring them on. Now, people will have died, and they will have died with heart attacks and stuff, and they may have had coronavirus as an incidental finding. Having said that, coronavirus, having predominantly thought to be a respiratory illness, actually probably isn't. It's probably a abnormality with the endothelial, which is the lining of blood vessels, leading to blood clots and damage in that way, which is why people are having kidney disease, why they're having strokes, why they're having blood clots in the lungs, as well as difficulties with this oxygen transfusion over the epithelial layers. So
could you just break that down? I've been reading that this week actually. Could you just break that down?
So basically what we think happens is that in the very, very tiniest blood vessels, the blood vessel wall gets damaged, and when it's damaged, a blood clot forms, and that blood clot then blocks off the flow to the very peripherals or the outside of those organs. So that affects any part of the body where there are tiny blood vessels, which is your kidneys, your skin, so people are getting chilblain-like rashes on the toes. It affects the brain and can cause a clot to form, which can cause you to have a stroke. It affects the blood vessels in the lungs, so clots can form there, and they cause blood clots in the lungs, which are called pulmonary embolus. And it can affect heart blood vessels and increase your risk of having heart attacks. So as well as affecting the tiny blood vessels in the lung, where oxygen is transferred from the lung tissue over into the blood. So it looks to be affecting the very tiny blood vessels, which is why it's having a knock-on effect on all these other systems. Mm-hmm. So we may find there are more heart attacks, and that might be COVID that's causing the heart attacks. Mm-hmm. So I think, the death numbers, we're not going to know until we're way through this.
Well, I know a lot of people were saying, they're comparing, for example, how many people died this year around this time and how many people died last year around this time. But there's so many things. I've tried to think about this, and there's just so many different issues we're trying to do that. We're trying to measure that. For one, we're not out and about, so your road deaths have probably dropped dramatically. Accidents on family outings and holidays and stuff like that. That's all stopped. Anything accidental will stop.
No pubs, no fights,
no
nothing
pubs,
like that.
no fights. No less stabbings. Probably higher domestic violence, unfortunately. But there are too much stuff involved there.
When this is all over, what they're going to look at is something called all-cause mortality. Okay, so that will look at all the reasons why people have died that have been put on death certificates. And you're right, there will be less of the accidental kind of deaths, but probably not a massive amount.
I think it's already increased by 10,000 from last year, from what I've looked at, all-cause mortality.
So the overall death rate has gone up. Even when you allow for COVID deaths, there's still an increase in the overall death rate. And that's because, first of all, people can die of something like a stroke, and they may have had COVID, and that's not being written down as the cause of death. What we're seeing in a lot of old people is that they're just getting a bit confused and then they're dying. And a GP is not necessarily going to put COVID as a cause of death down there because you've not had a test and you don't know, and it might just be old age. So the all-cause mortality, when this is over, is going to be really telling as to what the overall death rate is.
Am I right in saying that you can only get the death certificate can only go down as COVID-19 if you've had a test?
That's not true. No, you can put, so COVID, what the test is testing for, the test is testing for RNA of the virus itself, whereas COVID-19 is a syndrome, so it's the collection of clinical symptoms that someone has as a result of that virus. So if, say I saw someone and they died suddenly and they had a pneumonia, I would put the cause of death down as being pneumonia, but if I suspected it was COVID, as part 2 underneath, I would say they had pneumonia secondary to suspected COVID-19, and then that would then be classed in as part of the cause of death.
Right, yeah.
But the recording of death is a bit tricky too.
Yeah. I mean, it's so fucking morbid even having this conversation. Really, it's a strange conversation.
But it's a fascinating disease. I mean, it's an amazingly interesting disease. As long as you don't get it.
Yeah, as long as you're observing it.
As long as you're just observing it, yeah.
What makes you say that? What's so interesting about it? Because I've heard, various people coming forward, and some of them being specialists in their field, who are saying that this has been man-made. It's not been man-made. There's different people saying different things.
I might be proved wrong, but I don't buy it being man-made. I mean, we see SARS viruses transferring over from animals reasonably regularly. I just don't buy it being man-made. It's man-made in the sense that those animals are in a level of proximity to us that they would never be in natural life. But it's not, I don't think someone's created it and put it out there. I'm not that conspiracy theorist.
No, I mean, some of the things that I've been dying to bounce these ideas off you, not because I believe them, but because I've heard them, and I would like to. I mean, people have sent me. I've been sent a ridiculous amount of videos. Now, that's not. I completely understand why people may believe something like that. I mean, my first thought was that the fucking American government. I was sure it was the Americans. They've done it to China. I was sure that was what it was. I'm not a particularly like, what's the word? I'm not a conspiracy theorist.
I would have hoped if the American government had done it, they'd have at
done
least
a better job.
Enough in place to do a better bloody job. Yeah.
No, I've been since disproven by that fact. No, but you know what I mean. I was just thinking of the economic war that they were having with China at the time, the war for the market, and I thought, oh, that's a tricky move. That, maybe I'm a skeptical person, but it is what it is. But I would like to bounce some ideas off from various, as I say, they're supposed to be virus experts and so on. And I've heard both sides of the story. One guy was on LBC, and he was saying, look, this couldn't have been man-made. It's just naturally occurred. It's evolved the way everything else does. And then there was another one saying, actually, it had some of the elements of the SARS and some of the elements of AIDS virus. And
I don't know, in that we think it's probably an autoimmune thing, in that ultimately you get something called a cytokine storm happens. So that's when your immune system goes into overdrive and kills you.
Could you actually explain that cytokine storm in like as basic a term? Because I know what you're saying, but for everyone.
Well, it is basically that. It's that your immune system recognises that something's going wrong, and then throws everything at it to try and combat it, and releases a whole load of chemicals that actually end up killing you as a host. So your immune system doesn't recognise when to stop and ends up attacking yourself and causes death.
And what, I mean, from that, this is a massively interesting subject area. I'm sorry if it sounds, what do you call it, insensitive to those who are suffering through this, but I do find it a fascinating topic. I find immunity a fascinating topic in itself.
Yeah.
And there are people coming out, like there's a really good guy I follow called Wim Hof. Now, some of his stuff's fantastic. Now, what he's saying about coronavirus, I don't know. No, he's not one of the conspiracy theorists. He's simply saying, look, you can actually help. You can manipulate your immune system. Now, there was scientific studies done on this guy in 2002, I think it was.
Right.
And he was able to control his metabolism and control his immune system. So they injected him with bacteria that should have set off an immune response, and he stopped it. He manually stopped it happening. Now, you'd think that was impossible. I understood that as being impossible. I did not see that.
Well, because if you think about what something like hypnotherapy does, where people can have dental operations under hypnotherapy and not feel pain, our mind is an incredible resource that's not tapped. Now, I don't buy completely that you can stop all infection, but
no, I don't think he was even trying to get at that. He was just saying that why have they not used my blood to work this out? If there's something in the blood that can be used, and I thought to myself, well,
they are trying to do that. They're taking plasma from patients that have recovered, and they're now looking at a treatment therapy to treat people who have severe COVID, to see whether or not that will trigger their immune system and get things going. But a human body is a machine in homeostasis, isn't it? It's this perfect machine, completely balanced, and anything we do to it that disrupts that balance sets off a whole cascade of other reactions that we have no idea what the consequences are of. So with using any medicine ever, you never know what you're going to end up with as a result of doing something that logically should seem absolutely fine and beneficial, could actually be quite the opposite, and you've no way of knowing. So you have to be very careful about vaccines and about medicines that you're using. But they are doing that. They're taking the serology, so they're taking the plasma of patients that have recovered and seeing if they can use that as a therapeutic treatment for COVID. So
and you mentioned vaccines. Obviously, this whole cascade of the cytokine cascade that you mentioned that would help shut down people's bodies. How would the vaccine factor in there? Would that basically? I mean, my understanding is that it teaches the body how to respond to that particular virus and so on.
Yeah, so generally what a vaccine does is that you have some exposure to the pathogen, which is the organism that causes the disease, and it's just enough to get your body to recognize it and to trigger an immune response, so that your body makes the cells that then get rid of that pathogen, and then hopefully, ideally, your body then remembers that forever, and anytime it comes across that pathogen again, it just triggers it without you necessarily even noticing. And that's the idea of a vaccine. Now, some work more efficiently than others, and our bodies gain lifelong protection to some conditions like chickenpox, and get a transient protection to other conditions like your bog standard cold or flu. So we don't know yet what level of immunity having the disease will confer on a person, or having the vaccine will, and we just don't know that yet. It's going to be fascinating, because a vaccine's the way out of this, really.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen so much on social media that are set against vaccines, and this post came out at the start, and everybody who was an anti-vaxxer, basically the post said, you want to see a world without vaccines. Well, here's a world without one.
This is it. Yeah,
And,
this is what happens.
but this is a world without just one vaccine. Now, could you imagine the common cold and other viruses and smallpox, and I mean, they used to kill millions of people worldwide. And
well, measles, measles, the uptake in measles. There's talk of herd immunity, and herd immunity is when you've got enough people in the population that vaccinated or with a level of immunity that it stops the spread of infection. So, for example, if 80% of us had COVID, every time that we passed it on to someone, there'd only be 1 in 20 who would actually carry that disease forward, and that then brings the R number down, and that's what herd immunity is. So for a while, not everyone had to have the measles vaccine because there was enough herd immunity there to prevent it from becoming a pandemic or an epidemic. But then after obviously the MMR thing, we saw the uptake of the vaccine for measles dropping, and we started seeing outbreaks in babies who obviously hadn't had a chance to have the vaccine because that herd immunity wasn't there. And just a couple of years ago in Liverpool, there was some horrific measles outbreaks in newborn babies. It was awful.
And do you think that's simply because people have stopped getting vaccinated or refusing vaccines?
Yeah, and that herd immunity level dipped.
Yeah, I mean, one of the big debates or arguments right now is, there does seem to be a shutdown. I don't know what you'll think of this, but there has been a shutdown of some people off social media. I know your man, what do you call him, David Icke or something like that. He's a conspiracy theorist guy. Now, I think the guy's just an ex-footballer. I don't know really much about him, so I can't give one opinion one way or the other. I don't know that he's qualified to make some of the statements that he makes. But then I don't know that. Maybe he's gone on to do something else afterwards. I'm not sure. But one of the things that is happening is people are being deplatformed from social media, YouTube, Facebook, and so on. Now, I know this has got very little to do with the actual health service and so on, but how do you think that's going to influence public perception of the government and NHS, and will that affect the trust, do you think? It's such a pain in the ass. I think they should have just left them alone I mean, I don't believe in deplatforming someone.
You can't. I don't think you can deplatform people, precisely that, because it feeds into their paranoia in a way, doesn't it?
Exactly.
And gives justification as to some of what they're saying. But by the same time, I mean, social media is a funny thing. We live in our own little echo chambers where we have lots of confirmatory bias, don't we, about we communicate with people who agree with us, really. And so sometimes what we think is obvious to each other, actually when you get out into the open world, people just don't think the same way.
This is going to be completely off topic, but it's a perfect demonstration of what you've just said. Now, this may come across vulgar, but here we go, right? So some people wipe their bum sitting down, and some people wipe their bum standing up. And I did not know that this happened. I did not know that people stood up and wiped their bum. I had no idea because I'm a stutter, right? Right? I had no idea that this was happening, but apparently it's like 50-50. Now, this is all happening. Apparently so. This has all happened. This all come about because of a question that some woman has put out in social media, and it just went viral.
People stand up to wipe their bums?
Apparently so. So, I mean, this is a perfect example of like not knowing the other side, basically.
Yeah, exactly. Like, you don't know what you don't know. Exactly. That's the thing. You don't know what you don't know. And I think it's very difficult with social media, especially with the algorithms that the platforms have, because they point you in the direction of people they think you'll want to communicate with. So, I don't know. I don't think anything really should be taken down from social media. I think all
I believe in freedom of speech.
Opinions, all opinions should be. If only we were able to discuss them without descending into vitriol and meanness and bullying. That's the only problem.
Yeah, I do think that that's true. I think, I mean, in a way, I believe in getting vaccinated and stuff, and the science is there to back that, in my opinion, obviously. But I mean, I understand people's skepticism. I can understand why people would be skeptical or afraid or worried, because we don't know. We simply don't know. And there's a few people. I know that there was cases in the US where surgeons were sued for vaccinating children who then had autism. I don't know what that there. I mean, I know that there's multiple studies done, and we discussed a study recently where there was no body of evidence to suggest that there was a link.
There's no body of evidence. There is no evidence to suggest
but
a link at all.
There was legal cases won in the US against.
But if you think about the times when autism presents is the same time of development as when kids are getting their vaccines and stuff. There is absolutely no link.
Yeah, it's correlation.
Yeah. And and we're much more attuned at picking up things like autism as well. So we are detecting more of it because we're looking for it.
Well, that's true. I mean, even learning difficulties. I know whenever I had dyslexia all my life, and I didn't know until right before my GCSEs. Nobody told me. I had no idea why I was a slow writer.
I mean, autistic people will have always been there, and they do, and then. Yeah. But we just weren't picking them up in primary school at the ages of 5, 6, 7, and 8.
I actually want to come back on to another topic that's more general, and it's come off the coronavirus. And you said people were not showing up as much as the coronavirus, and you were talking about this strong link between mental health and physical health, or perceived physical health. How many, in your kind of subjective opinion, how many people are coming into you to see their GP with, and I know it's a hard question for you, but who really don't have any physical ailments, who are coming in really for mental health, but telling you that, and you don't have to answer that because I understand the implications. But
no, I think I'm smiling because I don't know how to quantify it, because again, it comes back to what you remember about the cases that you do. So I would say at least 50%, if not more.
And it's more mental health related. It's more anxiety around health.
Yeah, I mean, there isn't a serious medical illness that requires medical intervention. I would say that 50% of people come and see me with something that isn't a serious medical illness that requires medical intervention.
That's a good way to put it.
That's what I would say.
Very, what's the word for that?
That's what I would say. I mean, T, there are times when people are open to change and open to suggestion, aren't there? Mm-hmm. And if you get a person at the right time, I've been one of them. If you get a person at the right time who's reached a point where they're ready to put the faith in someone else and do something that feels alien to them because they trust the person that's telling them to do it and go with it, that you can make massive change to people. That you've done it with people. I do it with people. I've done it with myself. That there is a window of opportunity where you can implement change. And lifestyle change is one of the hardest things to do, isn't it? Because it's ingrained usually by the time you get to them.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, that's definitely one of our hardest things that we do is break habits. And even when you've had someone on a good pattern for 12 weeks or 15 weeks or a year, even after all that time, they can still slip and fall back into an old routine. I mean, the fact is that even if you've done something for the last year, that doesn't mean that you won't fall back, because at the end of the day, you have 15, 20 years, 30 years, 40 years of
exactly. Someone once said to me behaviour is like walking through a field of corn, and there's a path well trodden, and you take that path every single day, and you can do it with your eyes closed, and you do that for 30 odd years, and then someone asks you to take a different route, and you do it once, and then you can't find your way the next time, and then you do it 5 times and the path becomes a bit clearer, and then all of a sudden it rains, you've lost the path, and then you're back to your normal route again. And that's you know, it's not just behavioural, is it? There is physiological programming that goes on within brain tissue that allows that to happen. So change is really, really difficult.
That's why whenever people come on and they do something like our Crucible course, which is heavily oriented toward mindset and doing exactly what we're talking about, because really the long-lasting things, the long-lasting effects, you know, come with better habits. You're going to get better health through better habits, and if you can do that in 12 weeks, fantastic. But the reality is that you know, even after 12 weeks, we can get you doing it for that 12 weeks for certain. But by no means do I promise to. I teach you the skills of how to do it, of how to do it for yourself. But you know, because I've done what you've done, and that I've changed mine multiple times. But
it's a lifetime that you do it over, isn't it?
It's a lifetime commitment. It's not. There's no such thing as a 12-week fix. People have asked me, "Well, is that not me sorted now? Can I not just leave?" And it's just total nonsense. I say no, and I tell them that from day one. So I say, you know, in 12 weeks, you're going to have the right skills. I'm going to give you the right tools. Does that mean you're going to be a success? No, it fucking doesn't, because it still requires daily work from you, and it's not when you've got something pulling you in a direction. I believe that everything in life is an addiction of some sort, right? I know that that's a pretty insane belief for a lot of people, but once you've thought about it a bit, you actually realize that there's so much of what we do is this addictive behavior. So when you understand things like that, then it's, once you've highlighted the issue, I mean, like the 12 steps, first step is to fucking acknowledge that there's an issue. So the first thing is to understand that, it is an addictive behavior. I mean, you know, if you do keep going for biscuits with your tea, you know, that's a fucking behavior.
Well, the first thing is to recognise that you do it.
Exactly.
You know, it's because we're in denial all the time, and we're looking again for that bias confirmation. We're looking for behaviours, and we're looking for people who will agree with what we're doing and enable us to do that, aren't we? And so when you want to instigate change, what you've got to look for are people who are going to enable you to do what you want to do, you know, and enable you to do that change and to stick with it and recognise why you do what you do. It's about slowing thought processes down, I think, isn't it? And really understanding where the original trigger starts that triggers the thought process that leads to the behaviour.
It's that associations, isn't it? It's the association to past experience, or even somebody said, or you know, somebody has told you repeatedly. There's an association, and you have a thought pattern that's associated with that, and understanding that thought pattern and getting into it. So I don't know if you'd like to or not, and you don't have to go into it. We've had a long discussion about this. Obviously, we've known each other a long time, but I mean, would you like to go into your own journey?
I mean, I developed anorexia when I was late teens, so 18, 19, and then throughout the first sort of 10 years of my life of having developed an eating disorder, I sort of alternated between anorexia and bulimia. And then after the kids were born, my eating disorder became really, really severe. And when you've had something like that for so long, it becomes a way of life, and you think you can just live with it, and you accept that that's going to be part of you, and that you'll always have it, and that there's nothing that you can do about it, and it's an inevitable kind of thing. And then there were a series of things that happened. I caught my daughter looking at her stomach in the mirror when she was about 7, and I thought, oh shit. And then I realized that, you know, she was going to model herself on me, and I had a responsibility not to model good behavior for her, because I was devastated at the thought she'd end up the way I did. And then funnily enough, on Twitter, an advert came up for an eating disorder service just out of the blue. So I sort of subconsciously clocked that, and then it came up again, and I thought, right, you know, it was that window of time where I thought, I can't live this way anymore.
Yeah.
I need to do something. I don't know what I need to do, and I know I can't do it by myself, but something needs to change. Otherwise, my whole life is going to crumble, and I'm going to seriously damage the people in my life that I value, which wasn't me. It was my children, and you know, it was my children really. So I went and got help, and I had really very intense counselling and therapy with a woman called Shelley Perry, who runs an organisation called Breathe, that was for eating disorders, or people who had eating disorders. And I struggled a lot, because part of getting better means that you put weight on and your body changes, and you know, you sort of wonder what all that 20 years was for if you end up back where you were when it all sort of started. So there was a huge amount of adjustment that came with that. But part of my adjustment, my husband suggested I do some weight training, which is how I got into lifting. And I realised that if I was going to be bigger, then I might as well be strong and bigger and strong. And that sort of got me to appreciate what my body could do if I looked after it. And then when I got a bit bored of that, I decided I wanted to do the hardest thing ever, because that's what I'm like, and I'm an all or nothing kind of person, and that's how I met you. And I don't know, you know me better than I know myself probably too. I'm very reluctant to accept any help from anybody. I
mean, some of the stuff yeah, definitely, but I
am very, very good at telling people what they should do, and I am very much less good at doing it myself. but I do not have an eating disorder anymore, and that is one change that I have instigated in my life that I am most proud of, because regardless of how crap I am at accepting help in every other area of my life, I did accept help for that, and I took it on board, and I have changed, and and I feel very privileged in that I have then been able to pass those tools on to other people in similar situations, and I've seen them change too. And that has been one of the most overwhelming and rewarding experiences that I've ever had. And it feels like there's a positive energy that Shelley gave to me, and then I've been able to pass on to other people, and it's wonderful. So, and you've been part of that.
To be honest, that's, you know, I did want to mention that, obviously not his name, but a mutual friend of ours, you know, basically told me that you'd saved their life. And that's, you know, I knew you had done things like that, and it's incredible to hear that. It must be incredible for you to hear that. And definitely, you mentioned about value and not putting value on yourself. Now, we'll not go into a coaching thing today,
no,
but
we've not
the place for it. But would you say that when you're able to show that value for other people and help other people, would you say that helps to feed back and give you some value for yourself? Or do you feel like there's no connect there?
Oh no, there's a connect. When someone thanks me for doing something like that, it makes me feel uncomfortable. I don't take that well, but it makes what I went through feel worthwhile. Because if I'd gone through 20 years of nearly killing myself for no reason to not help anybody else, it'd be soul destroying. But when someone else puts a level of trust in you and does what you say because they trust you, not because they ever think it will help them, they only do it because they trust you, and it works, because they're committed, it's life affirming, really. So
I mean, having been through that so many times over, it's amazing when it goes right.
yeah,
But it's funny, I can't remember how many people I've helped, but I can't remember how
yeah.
many people I've let down.
Well, that's because we're humans,
You
and
know,
that's because
it's fucking soul destroying. Like I have a list in my head of people that I know I need to get back to, who I still do get back to, and it's weird. And I'm aware of that. That probably shouldn't be the way I should do things, but I can't help
you
it.
need to do a mindset on that.
I should do. No, certainly. I mean, and I think that's the beauty, and what I try to tell people is that there's no perfect person out there, and people sometimes, you know, after they've done a 12-week course with me, they seem to have this kind of, they put me up too high, and I'm saying, no, that's not the way it is.
Yeah.
Like, I'm exactly the same as you are. You know,
Yeah.
I've just started earlier, or you know,
Yeah.
there's no difference. It's exactly the same. I still have my daily struggles, like anyone does. But once you've made change in something, that's powerful, and when you can pass that on and teach that, I mean, that's simply all I ever do. That's what I do for a living, and you do the same, clearly.
And what's really good about it is that sometimes you get people when they're not ready, and you can get them again a few months down the line or a year down the line, and they are ready, and it's brilliant.
I think that's the reason I go back.
Yeah.
There's been one person in the entire time, which I won't go into any specific details, but there's been one person who I've cut off completely in the whole time that I've coached. One person.
Yeah.
And it was unfortunate, but it was one of the things. Now,
sometimes that's the right thing to do. Yeah.
Yeah, and in a way, I do actually believe that making that step will help them more so than me being there.
Yeah.
I actually do think that the absence of me was better for them than me being around. So, I mean, we talked briefly about people coming in with who basically just needed a healthier lifestyle. How much, if you could quantify it, how much would eating better, sleeping better, and doing some fucking exercise every day, how much would that impact people's health? Like, I mean, I say this, I'm telling people all the time, and I think coming from you, coming from a doctor, I know people take it for granted, but like, how much would that actually impact people, do you think?
Structure and routine is everything. Okay, so getting up the same time, eating the same food, doing the same thing, being answerable to someone, and having structure and routine in your life is really important. And one of the ways you do that is with exercise and eating properly and being answerable to yourself. Your body is a machine. It's there to serve you, and despite all the abuse we throw at it, almost always it does an amazing job. But if you had a car and treated it like crap, it wouldn't keep going for 80 years. You know, you've got to put the right stuff in to get the right stuff out, and it's really, really simple. So I think if people could get sunlight, exercise daily, drink enough water, not drink alcohol, not smoke, not put toxins into your body, if you can do that, you're going to improve your health by 50% minimum. There are illnesses and diseases that are going to knock that and make it harder, but like, people come to see me with back pain all the time and they want tablets, and they say, what can I do to make it better? And I tell them the way that you make it better is you strengthen your back, and that's the only thing that you can do long term that's going to do it.
We've made some massive grounds actually with another mutual friend.
Massive grounds with other people
from
doing that. But you know, people have to accept that it's going to be hard work, and that it's going to hurt a bit, and it's going to be hard work. But structure, exercise, healthy diet, and think of your body as a machine and respect it and give it what it needs in order to function properly. It's simple.
You mentioned alcohol there, and I've gone off multiple times throughout my life. When I was training for mixed martial arts, I went off drink completely. Now I'm Irish, so you can understand the difficulty in that. Whenever, you know, and I do still enjoy a pint. I mean, I enjoy red wine now more so, and my odd whiskey. But I mean, I'm taking probably you know, if I have a drink once a week, it would be, and it never. The one thing I make sure of, and I did it this week actually, is that I never let it impact on my routine the next day on my exercise.
Yeah.
Make it up slightly later, but not that much later. So I get up with the kids, and so I never have enough that it causes that kind of disruption in my lifestyle. And by one day, and I still train. Once I've trained, usually I've gotten rid of it. I've gotten rid of that shit feeling. Training in a cold shower, fantastic, works wonders for me personally. But I think it's important to say, whilst all that routines is great, you do need to have crazy times as well and enjoy your life. And well, you've done it.
But that's the thing about routine, isn't it? It isn't about using it as a tool to beat yourself up about. It's not about inducing guilt. It's about providing a structure that then you can build around and have flexibility around, because that structure's always there. And that's what I mean by what I mean about routine. It's a base.
I think that people get this misconception whenever you try to instill routine in them, in their life, they fight back against it because they feel like it's an interruption of their freedom. But it's not.
Routine, quite the opposite.
Absolutely. Jim Rohn, one of the best kind of business coaches, he trained Tony Robbins, who is now a billionaire, so he's done all right. Jim Rohn says that routine equals freedom. And once you have that routine, or discipline equals freedom. Sorry, it wasn't routine, but discipline equals freedom, and I firmly believe that. I think that's something that once you have that discipline, it allows you to, because freedom has a cost, and that's something that I hope to talk about a lot in the coming weeks. But freedom does have a cost, definitely, and the cost of it is discipline.
If you look at kids that are struggling, the ones that struggle most are the ones that don't have structure. And I think given the situation we're in now with lockdown, that's even more important, isn't it? And it doesn't have to be 6 hours of homeschool. What it may need to be is that you have your breakfast at the same time every day, and you have a form of exercise roughly at the same time every day, and that you go to bed at the same time roughly every day. It's that kind of structure that I'm sort of talking about. And it's really, really, really important, especially now. And I realized I was having a drink every day at like 4 o'clock after when I'm making dinner or whatever, so I've had to nip that in the bud the past 10 days and not had anything. And God, it was hard. The first 2 days I was craving a bloody drink, and you think, God, so easy to fall into. Don't do it.
There was a saying, I can't remember it exactly, I may butcher this, but I'll do my best. They say that a habit's as light as a feather until it's as heavy as an iron.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's
like it.
It's as light as a feather. You don't notice yourself slipping into the habit, but once you're in it, it's a fucking nightmare to get off. The weight of it then is very hard to move.
Yeah.
Definitely. So, what's next? What's next for Caroline? What's your plans? What's the plans throughout this coronavirus? Are you back Olympic weightlifting?
I am. So I am in a very privileged position in that I have a lot of equipment and I have a space to train in. So it's funny, isn't it? Because in the lead up to this, I was very disillusioned with it and thinking of jacking it all in. But I have been training again. I've this bloody shoulder. Yesterday, same thing, you get to a certain weight and it just is still. So, and I've done some squats today and hurt me back. So but I'm doing cardio, going out on my bike and walking with the kids, bloody cardio. So I'm really lucky. I live in a beautiful area. I can get out on my bike, we can take the kids for a walk in the countryside. So I'm managing to train every day really, and I'm loving it, I have to say.
Great, isn't it? I've actually enjoyed the training more since this whole thing's happened, because I've not got as much other things going on. I've not got as much other stressors.
So I take the kids for a walk when I'm not at work. I take the kids for a walk. We do a 6-mile walk in the morning, and then I go in the garage and I train for an hour and a half, and then I come in and I make tea, and I'd usually have a glass of wine, and I'm not doing that now. And then I'm out like a light. My sleeping's better and everything. So. Sort of loving it.
never go back.
No, I know, but I am very, very privileged.
Yeah.
Very privileged.
Yeah, but you've worked. You've worked to get there, so that can't be taken away from you either.
Yeah.
I mean, you've had your own battles and you've worked hard to get there. It's not been an easy ride for you. So, yes, you're in a privileged position now, but it wasn't easy to be there. So,
yeah.
And you've helped many people along the way, including myself, which we appreciate the emphasis.
Well, I hope so.
I mean, it's a fact. So it's definitely you've definitely been a
It's
massive
that positive energy, isn't it? If you surround yourself by people who you can aspire to be like, then only good can come out of that, can't it? You know, you are a reflection of the people that you associate with, I think. So
I think that's definitely true, and it's funny that, you know, between the confirmation bias and that, you know, that you're actively seeking that. We ended up with a pretty tight, small community in the gym that, you know, very influential on each other and helpful for each other for the most part, at least.
Yeah, and I loved it.
Yeah, it was great.
I look forward to it getting, much as I love my own gym. It may be that in the future, you know, I'm going to miss you all and need to get back into training and having a laugh and seeing Dan in his shorts and Mike with his peg leg.
I think he's fully up and running now, Mike is.
Of course he is. He'll be in his element. So strong. So strong. Anyway, I've got bread rolls proving.
Perfect.
So I need to go and check my breads. That's the other thing, baking bread. Who knew? Love it.
Yeah. Well, you were pretty good. You'd always made cakes and so on.
No, but bread, it's like, but it's really good.
Chuffed with yourself?
Yeah, I'm really chuffed with myself. Might be a baker. No, I'm kidding.
Retire and be a baker?
Retire and be a baker. Yeah. So.
I was going to ask one more question.
Go on.
Do you want to? It shouldn't take too long. What do you think the effects, coming from your health perspective, and you've given loads of information so far, it's been brilliant. But from a healthcare professional, let's say, or a doctor, or whatever way, how do you think it's going to impact the economy, and what do you think that the effects of the economy on health overall? How is that going to be?
The two are so closely linked. You know, there are loads of small and medium businesses and the bigger ones where people are losing their jobs, and you know, in the same way that a body is a machine that is very finely tuned and balanced, that's what people's lives are like as well. So most people can't afford to not have an income for longer than a month, you know. And once that starts falling apart, once the security of your home goes, or the security of your job, that then has a knock-on effect on your mental health, which has a knock-on effect on your physical health, and then we're in a downward spiral. So we're going to be feeling the outcomes of this for years and years and years. And even with government help in terms of grants and things, a lot of people aren't able to access them. A lot of people aren't able to afford them. A lot of the work isn't there. The businesses that they were trying to maintain aren't there. And I think the period of uncertainty is just devastating. So I think there's no way there's not going to be a massive recession. You know, that it's just not feasible.
From what I've been following, several financial advisors and kind of, you know, investors, and they were talking about a recession coming. I mean, somebody predicted it for 2016. Obviously, it's 4 years later, but they said they've been saying since 2012 that there's going to be a recession after.
Well, there was a housing bubble anyway, wasn't there? And then this has just plummeted everything. And I think, you know, if you believe the likes of Trump and Boris, that it's going to go back up in that V shape, but it's not. There's going to be a plateau. The damage has already been done, and I think people are going to be cautious. Even if lockdown is lifted, people are going to be cautious, and they're not going to go to restaurants, they're not going to go to pubs. And then when you think there's the people then that supply those places, and then the people that grow the food that supplies those places. So, you know, when you look at a business, you also have to look at the whole chain that supports that business in the first place. And it's, I
personally know a supplier who is, you know, her business taking a massive hit, where, you know, up to 80% of her normal, you know, shipped produce has not been shipped anymore. Because the restaurants are all closed.
Yeah.
See?
Or you've got food in the fields that you can't get people over to come and pick it, so it's all just going to go to waste. And I think then we're very privileged in the health service in that our jobs are safe for now. But if tax income doesn't come in because there isn't work out there and the health service doesn't get funded, we could end up being you can't just go on printing money.
No, that's true. Yes, that's what's landed us in this pickle in the first place, because it was already heading down that way, because for the last recession in 2008, all they did was print money.
Yeah, that's all they did was just print money.
Exchequer just kept printing, so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How beautiful is this? Look at him.
How did I know you would bring a cat on the podcast?
This is Whiskey Bear, and he's so beautiful, aren't you?
Is that the new one? Is that the older one?
He's about 8. We got him from a rescue though.
There was a newer one you'd rescued. Was it a grey one?
Smally bit. Oh no, I found him a home somewhere else. I wasn't allowed to keep him.
Oh, okay. Oh well.
John put his foot down. So. John's the boss in this house. I just would never let him know that.
Well,
he's definitely the boss.
It's going to be up there for public view now, so you better hope he doesn't watch it.
Anyway, yeah.
Well, Caroline, I'll wrap it up there. Thanks a million, and I hope your bread.
I'm going to go and check my bread. Yeah. I'll send you a picture.
Do.
Oh, it's lovely speaking to you, T.
Likewise.
I miss you.
Thanks a million, Caroline. Thanks for coming on.
Take care. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Yeah, bye-bye. Bye.